All right, let's talk about power. In that high-stakes game, mistakes are gonna happen. It's inevitable. But what really separates the winners from the losers, it's how you handle those mistakes. Today, we are diving deep into Robert Greene's Law 26, Keep Your Hands Clean. It's all about how to keep a perfect public image, even when things get messy.
And right there, that's the heart of it. Notice the word seem. This law isn't about actually being a perfect person, who is, right? It's about appearing to be perfect. The whole game revolves around managing what people see, making sure that no matter what's going on behind the curtain, your reputation stays absolutely spotless.
So that's the big question, isn't it? If you want to have power, you're going to have to do some difficult, sometimes pretty ruthless things. You're definitely going to make some mistakes. So how on earth do you maintain this image of grace and flawless efficiency when reality is so often clumsy and, frankly, brutal? Well, this law gives us two very powerful and very controversial solutions.
So here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll look at the fundamental problem of making mistakes when you're in charge. Then, we'll get into the two main tactics for keeping your hands clean, using a scapegoat and using a cat's paw. And to wrap it all up, we'll dig into the psychology of why these strategies actually work so well.
Okay, let's get right into it. Now, you might think a malicious act would be the most damaging thing a leader could do, but often it's an honest mistake that's far more dangerous. And why is that? Because malice, well, that can be spun as strength, as being decisive. But a mistake just screams incompetence, and the second people doubt your competence, your power starts to just dissolve.
And this is the crucial part to understand. Apologizing or making excuses, that's often the absolute worst thing you can do. See, an apology doesn't just make the mistake go away. It shines a giant spotlight on it, it makes people question your judgment, and then they start wondering, well, what else are they hiding? The truly powerful get this. They don't explain problems, they make them disappear. So if saying I'm sorry is a no-go, you've got to make the mistake itself vanish. And what's the most effective way to do that? Find someone else to pin it on. And that's where we meet our first tool, the scapegoat. You know, this idea is ancient. The term literally comes from a ritual where the sins of the people were confessed over a goat, which was then cast out into the wilderness, symbolically carrying all that guilt away with it. The principle is exactly the same today. You transfer your mistake, your sin, onto someone else, who is then sacrificed to clean up your reputation. Let's look at a classic, if brutal, example. You've got this Chinese general, Cao Cao. He screws up. He badly miscalculates his army's food supply. Now the soldiers are starving. They're starting to grumble, and they're looking right at him. He's on the brink of a full-blown mutiny, and it's all because of his own blunder.
His solution? It was unbelievably cold. He calls in his supply chief, a guy who did nothing wrong, and says, I need to borrow something from you, your head. He has the man executed, puts his head on a spike, and blames him for the shortage. Instantly, the grumbling stops. The army is satisfied. Cao Cao's mistake, completely forgotten, buried with the body of an innocent man.
But you see, scapegoats aren't just for cleaning up messes after they happen. They can be part of the plan from the very beginning. Take Cesare Borgia. He had to tame a totally lawless territory, and he knew he'd have to use brutal, violent methods. He also knew that people would despise whoever did that dirty work. So, he planned ahead.
And this shows us the two ways to play this. Cao Cao's move was reactive. It was a desperate fix for a crisis he created. But Borgia's move? That was proactive. He hired a notoriously cruel man to be his enforcer, knowing he was going to sacrifice him later. And once the region was pacified, Borgia had his enforcer publicly chopped in half, leaving the people, as the story goes, both stunned and satisfied. They saw Borgia not as the tyrant, but as their savior. Okay, so the scapegoat takes the blame for something that's already happened. But what if you need someone to do the dirty work for you in the first place? Something risky or unpopular? Well, for that, you need a totally different kind of tool. You need a cat's paw.
The name comes from this old fable about a monkey who wants to get chestnuts that are roasting in a fire. He's clever, so instead of reaching in and burning himself, he grabs the paw of a sleeping cat and uses it to pull the chestnuts out. The monkey gets the tasty reward, and the poor cat just gets a burned paw. The cat's paw is the person you use to take all the risks for you.
And Cleopatra was an absolute master of this. She wanted to rule Egypt alone, but that meant getting rid of her own siblings. She couldn't be seen as a murderer, especially of her own family.
So what did she do? She seduced and manipulated the two most powerful men on the planet at the time, Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. They became her cat's paws. They fought her battles, killed her rivals, and handed her the throne of Egypt, all while she looked like a queen who was just trying to survive her treacherous family.
Now, using a cat's paw can be a long, epic-level game of strategy. In the 1930s, Mao's communist forces were getting absolutely crushed. They were on the verge of being wiped out by Chiang Kai-shek's army. And then, Japan invaded China. For almost anyone else, this would be a complete disaster. But for Mao, it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
Mao's strategy was nothing short of brilliant. He calls a truce with his mortal enemy, Chiang, and convinces him to lead the fight against the invading Japanese. Now, Mao knew that Chiang's big, conventional army would take the brunt of the damage, while his own guerrilla forces could just hang back, regroup, and actually grow stronger. He used the Japanese as a cat's paw to destroy the nationalists, and he used the nationalists as a cat's paw to wear down the Japanese. In the end, Mao just waited for his two biggest enemies to tear each other to shreds.
So we've seen the what and the how, but let's talk about the why. Why are these tactics so incredibly effective? It all comes down to some very basic human psychology.
At the end of the day, this law works because of a simple human truth. We really don't like to blame ourselves for things. It's just human nature to look for someone, or something, else to point the finger at. A good scapegoat gives people a very simple, very satisfying target for all their anger. It redirects everything away from you, the actual source of the problem. It proves, once again, that what people see is so much more important than what's real. The philosopher Baltasar Gracian really nailed it centuries ago. Power is a kind of theater, and your reputation is the main performance. It's not about being flawless, it's about being flawless at hiding your flaws. It means being careful is way more important than actually being good.
And that really leaves us with one final, pretty uncomfortable question. This law lays out a playbook for holding on to power by managing what people see. But when you start using other people as pawns and scapegoats for your own mistakes, it forces you to ask, where does clever strategy stop, and where does cruel, amoral manipulation begin? And that's a question I'll leave with you.